Hello there, YouTube. I apologize for the long absence and delay of putting out any videos, but about 5 months ago, I ended up moving, which is not part of my plan, so I had to kind of get things together and pack up everything. And I've actually moved a couple states away from where I originally was, and now I'm living in western Minnesota, about 40 miles east of Fargo, North Dakota. So, um, pretty pretty long distance compared to where I was at. I'm also living out in the country now, and consequently, I don't have internet access. I can't get internet access where I'm at. So, to upload and produce videos, I have to record them at home and then drive into town and upload them at the public library. So that's also been another factor in the delay of um, any participation I've had on YouTube or any other social media for that matter. Um, but anyway, the subject of today's video is going to be experience. Um, this is going to be uh, part one in a series of videos on character rewards. It'll probably be a two-part video on character rewards. Um, I was going to read a quote out of the book on what the book suggests for giving away experience, but you actually don't want to hear that. If you wanted to hear that, you just buy the book or you read it out of your own book. But for those of you that are still not familiar with GURPS, I'll summarize. Basically, the book, the designer encourages you as a GM to give out experience based on how well they're role playing. What are the stated goals and objectives and the advantages and disadvantages that their particular character has? If they're playing within um, the original character concept, whether it helps the mission or is negative to the mission, you should get some um, experience for good role playing. And then for completing missions or good progress towards an ongoing campaign, you should get experience based on that. What it doesn't give you experience for is combat. Nowhere in the book is it mentioned that you get experience for combat. And this is actually one of the many things that I find quite pleasant about GURPS is it's not a combat-based experience system, unlike going back to, of course, Dungeons and Dragons, because that's the other system I have the most experience in and what most people are familiar with. Um, Especially with first edition, um, you got experience for dungeon hacking, for beating up monsters, for finishing fights. Role playing really took a back seat to the combat aspect in those sorts of games. And that could have been the GM that I was used to, but I think most people that have played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and its precursor Dungeons and Dragons, especially, there really was no, uh, at least, game mechanism to encourage role playing. Yeah, okay, I'm a fighter. Or, oh, how about this? The cleric and the thief might get into an argument about um, looting the dead if they find other dead adventurers or something like that, and that would be an opportunity for role playing. But you get no experience for that. Whereas in GURPS, if um, you make a pious or religious type character, or even just a very, very scrupulous atheist, is that kind of a contradiction? I don't know. I'm not trying to poke fun at anybody, but point is, if you have, it'd actually be disadvantages if you have so much reverence and respect for the dead that maybe you shouldn't touch them, or looting them you find that immoral, and it actually puts you in conflict with another character. and you both role play that out, you get experience for that in GURPS if your GM is doing what he's supposed to. In D&D, no, that's just role playing. That's the fun of role playing is its own reward. Um, I've found that that sort of attitude does not encourage good role playing, and the beauty of GURPS is the experience you get for good role playing is its own kind of benefiting uh, cycle. So I've I've given people um, just at the end of the gaming session, if I know everybody played in character, everybody gets a point of experience right off the bat. If somebody went above and beyond, like the example I gave earlier, where the two get to an argument, um, usually I would give experience at the end of the game, but I actually got into the habit, especially with larger groups of people that wanted to play, and um, also longer gaming sessions, and the fact that for a while there we like to keep a bottle of whiskey on the table, and that made it difficult to remember things. So I'd actually give experience at the moment in game when I saw a player doing something with their character that I thought was positive to role playing, positive to storytelling, encouraging the creative process, and was within their character concept. For example, a cowardly person that does a brave act would not be within their character concept. But if they were avoiding the fight and they could actually have an opportunity to uh, do some good, but they played in character and didn't seize that opportunity to role play to their best ability, right there, I'd give them an experience point, or maybe two experience points in such uh, a, a very specific instance like that that could actually have long term ramifications. Um, and before I go on, um, the amount of experience. Now I'm talking about one or two, three experience points, and if you're playing Palladium, if you're playing Pathfinder, if you're playing well, it's not TSR now. What is it? Wizards of the Coast. Their D&D, whatever version of it is. I think we're up to 5th edition now. Anyway, um, you're talking about 10 points of experience for doing something mundane, whereas the you can get hundreds, if not thousands, of experience points within a gaming session. Whereas GURPS, again, according to the book, it says a norm should be 2 to 3 experience points a gaming session, with 5 being the maximum. And I try and actually stick with that because it can allow characters to get rapidly inflated. Um, Especially when you understand that the experience point system um, is, when you think about one experience point, that reflects about 6 months of training or study in a certain aspect of that individual's life, or 4 months, 3 or 4 months of very hard, strenuous training or study in um, that individual's life. So if you end up getting 10 experience points um, in one gaming session, you can have uh, some very difficult skills at professional levels um, within a matter of well, essentially days, even, or weeks, if you're, depending on the pacing of the game. Now, if there's time between adventures, like the GM's, you're done with a adventure storyline, and the GM tells you, well, next time it's going to be 6 months later. That's an instance where, again, you can justify that, but not typically. So 5 actually would be the maximum experience, and I think on a few occasions I've gone above and beyond that. But this is a fairly drawn out gaming session when that happens. Usually, uh, not your typical kind of afternoon or late evening. It could be a 7, 8, 9 hour gaming session. So I feel that's actually a fairly, um, if the players are participating thoroughly and really driving the story forward and getting a lot of things accomplished, then going above that maximum is justifiable. Things I've done in the past that I would not recommend doing, for the longest time, as a way of encouraging players. Um, I would give you an experience point just for showing up, because I wanted, partly for everyone to keep pace, but also so that way everyone at least felt somewhat involved, even if they were new to the game or the system. And in retrospect, I'm not ever going to do that again, because it allows players to not participate yet keep pace, which sounds good because then you don't have overinflated players. But through experience, I've found that if they're not going to participate to the fullest, then they don't actually deserve that. It undermines the work that your harder working, more participating players are doing when they're only getting 2 or 3 more experience points, or 1 or 2 more experience points than the guy that just showed up and just rolled his dice and didn't participate. And um, also, I've found that experience should also be its own reward, which is why I wanted to make the two, or why I wanted to make rewards and experience one video, but uh, just because of time, I'm going to do it as two. Um, but as a GM, if you're a story-driven GM, if you believe that the characters drive the story and the GM or the DM, whatever you call them, supplies the narrative and supplies the world. I prefer a sandbox sort of environment, although with certain games I will have a much more linear focused storyline. Just different stories lend themselves towards that. Usually a fantasy setting is much more open to the big sandbox style thing, where, for example, I did Predator versus Aliens, and it really had to be I don't want to say a railroaded story, but in order to have a justifiable reason why Space Marines and a Predator would fight side by side, as the GM, you kind of had to force their their hands together to, because on their own you couldn't guarantee that. Um, but getting back to what I was saying, that experience should be its own reward for participation. Uh, Playing, as I said, playing in character. The book says give them experience. As a GM, why not? They're helping you tell your story. They're giving the other players a reason to come back because they're making it fun for them too. Progressing the story, that deserves experience as well for the same reason. But also, the experience is not just a reward for the player to keep coming back and to feel like they're progressing. It's a reward for their character. Their character is actually experiencing these events. Their character, if they successfully get through a car chase and actually play it through character rather than, well, I'm just going to roll my drive skill and get out of this situation. I rolled a 4, what happens? It's not very fun. But if they're saying, okay, what's going on? Is there an exit I can take? Is there asking the description of the other vehicles on the freeway or something, and really try and tell the story with you and encourage the other players to tell that story with them. There's maybe another car chasing them, so they're asking another player in character, did we lose him yet? Those sorts of moments really do give um, the characters themselves, not the player, the character, assuming that it's a something real rather than a figment of everyone's imagination. But in a real situation, that would give them experience. Because the next time they get into a car chase, well, of course, they've done this before. Their driving skill is better. They just got out of that previous situation. So the skills they used in that car chase, they're improving, which deserves experience, because in the GURPS system, your experience goes right back into your skills and your character development. So as one of the as of course, if you've watched enough of my videos, you understand that I love the GURPS system, and this is one of the reasons I love the GURPS system, because the way experience, if properly distributed, it really drives the characters in terms of their rewards, and it drives the characters in terms of their development in a very realistic fashion, rather than um, your your level based your level based character class system. Whereas in your more level based character class system, or just class system in general, you get 1,000 experience. Now you get bumped up, and your hit points can potentially double, and you get a new ability or a feat, or your attacks you get a +2 and a +1 on your second attack, or maybe you get a second attack, or something like that. Whereas in GURPS, you don't just kind of work on this multiplicity scale of getting better and better in kind of stages. You gradually grow and develop, but I feel it's a more natural progression for the character, but it's also a more natural progression for the player, because their abilities are increasing at a slower rate, which means they're getting used to that character at a slower rate. And any GM that's or any player that's played in a game where the GM says, well, make all level 10 characters, you're still not quite used to the way your character plays for the first several gaming sessions. Maybe not even until you reach level 11 and you can start kind of planning out your next batch of skills. But that's because you didn't play through all those other abilities. You didn't play through all those other stages where you became comfortable with what the character could do. Rather, you're just given this kind of monster to, no pun intended, this kind of monster that right out of the box is already ready to hack and slash, rather than kind of build up to a playable and realistic character. A couple other things I want to mention about experience. The book mentions, in its description of experience, it mentions things you could get negative experience for. That's not something I really... I mean, I guess I do, but I don't announce this to players. I don't say, well, you lost an experience point. Because, as I said, I will give out experience in-game when I think players are doing something that they deserve experience for, and part of that is because I might forget at the end of the game. And as a side, I've never found that actually to be something that upsets other players. Well, why does he get more experience than me? Everybody knows why they got that experience, because everyone was there and participating, and if they weren't there, that's why they didn't get the experience. Because maybe they were, upstairs taking a dump and ordering a pizza, and an hour later, then they start getting into character and playing. So I don't maybe announce that I'm giving negative experience, but in my head I will kind of count certain things against players if they're just making dice towers and not paying attention, or starting fights, or just deliberately doing things out of character. And may not necessarily be because they're bored with the game. It could be that they had a bad day at work and just can't get their head in it. Um, but consequently, they don't deserve experience if they're not experiencing anything. And that's going back to the participation point. I don't give that out anymore. Um, I might have mentioned this in my skills video. Actually, I think I might have taken that video down. Actually, I'm looking at the timer here, and I'm getting on about 20 minutes, so I'm not going to talk about um, experience based uh, on skills too much, other than to say that kind of collectively going back to the progression and the the slower, more gradual experience and character growth is, as a GM, you can also give players experience points and tell them that it only applies towards a specific skill, especially in instances where um, they might not have um, they could be a surgeon, for example, but they don't have neurosurgery, and they could be kind of developing that. I don't know how they develop it necessarily. Maybe they're reading textbooks or something in their spare time, or they're participating in a um, online lab or something, and so 3 hours every night they're working on that. Um, Again, these are things the book actually covers, but I'm actually doing it in a much more condensed fashion than the book does, because it kind of spreads it all out. And without actually reading the whole book, you don't kind of get it the first time. But video again get kind of long, so I'm going to say thank you for watching, and sorry about the long delay in other videos. And yeah, thanks for watching.